going to move on, John, to music news now. Just a brief discussion on Mary McCartney talking about, obviously, the new Abbey Road documentary, If These Walls Could Sing. This premiered on, I think it was the weekend, on Disney Plus here in the UK. I'm not sure where it, for the rest of the world, but certainly here in the UK it premiered. And it is now available. I will be watching this probably over the next couple of days, and I know you will be as well, John.
I've seen the trailer and said right away.
The new documentary. First and foremost, Mary McCartney being Paul McCartney's daughter.
James Paul McCartney.
Paul and Linda's daughter. Tells the NME about documenting the history of the music's most iconic studio. Because of my surname, she said, I almost shied away from doing the project. I can get that. Abbey Road, John, interestingly, during the Beatles period, wasn't called Abbey Road Studios. That was renamed Abbey Road. It was EMI, but
was it?
Yeah,
I was about to say Olympic, but that was another one.
That was the other
it?
one. Yeah, that's where they had to do some of Abbey Road, the actual album.
It's funny, isn't it? Wasn't all
But,
done in Abbey Road?
Yeah, John, the documentary which arrives here, it's arrived in the UK now on the 6th of January. Charts a long history of the iconic London studio and includes interviews with the Beatles, of course, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, alongside Elton John, Nile Rodgers, Noel and Liam Gallagher, Roger Waters, Celeste, George Lucas, and more. That's the side, John, that I wasn't expecting. I thought it was going to be predominantly, it's Mary McCartney, it's going to be mostly about the Beatles, mostly about Paul. I did see the premiere. I saw the interviews, obviously, with Ringo as well. Fantastic. I'm glad he's back on his feet, because I think he had COVID just before Christmas.
He did, yeah.
I'm glad to see that. Roger Waters, interesting as well, from obviously Pink Floyd. Elton John, Noel and Liam, obviously getting interviewed separately. But John, the list goes on and on. When you think of all modern artists as well, who all want to record at least one song, not just an album, but even if they can just get one track.
But you'd want to record it in studio too.
Yeah, the one with the staircase.
Yeah, the one with the staircase, because that is the Beatles room. So if you're going to Abbey Road, you'd stipulate, I want to be in that room, because the history. I just love the sound, the noise of this. The noise, I'm talking crap. I love the name. That's the word I was looking for. The name of this documentary. If These Walls Could Sing, is that what it is called?
Yeah.
I did think that.
And your bird can sing.
Yeah, we were talking about that before we come on. For me, the best song on Revolver, Come At Me, Beatles bitches. Because I know we're in a fucking group and they like an argument.
They don't like a joke.
No, they don't like a joke, no. Very racist. Very racist people. I
never
realised.
Come out it, by the way.
Yeah, you're going to come out of it, yeah?
I think so, yeah.
It's strange, yeah. A group that preach nothing about peace and love and welcoming and, I mean, celebrating different cultures, going to India and doing transcendental meditation. For them to seemingly have a fan base that doesn't like someone purely because they're from a different part of the world is really, really strange to me. Doesn't make much sense.
John, somebody actually posted that classic Lennon and Yoko interview with Parky when he was talking about, I mean, they don't say that about the most glamorous people. I can't remember the words Lennon saying that. He says they actually called her ugly, and Parky, being Parky, is fantastic the way he handled it. But I'll tell you something, there was hardly a response on it, because they'll not want to talk about that in that group, But anyway,
they're strange racist people.
John, 90 years old, the studio is.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that there.
I went off,
the name, Stephen, the name, man, the name's perfect, because look, if you could be a fly in the wall, these walls could sing. They really could, Stephen. The history is steeped in the very sort of firmament, I'm going to use that word, of that place, that studio. There's been so much brilliance, greatness created in those studios. And just to chart it, just outside the Beatles, as you say, as you went through all those names, man, it's going to be a really, really cool documentary to watch, because there's stuff even I don't know, I'm sure, about these studios.
Yeah.
Utterly iconic name within music. And I just love the documentaries that are coming out over the last 5-10 years. And there's been some top class.
Disney Plus are doing some really good stuff, John. I watched the McCartney one, the 1, 2, 3 of it was called.
The black and white effort.
It's fantastic, yeah. I really enjoyed it. And you know me, I'm a Lennon man, but I love McCartney. I think the guy's absolutely amazing.
See, these weird, that's another thing, off on a tangent. These weird individuals that try to
put them up against each other. Yeah,
put them against it. What the fuck are you talking about? They're the Beatles.
Yeah.
There is no Beatles without Paul. There is no Beatles without John. There is no Beatles without George or Ringo.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always said, for all the sort of pluses that Mac has got, Lennon's got those pluses in different ways, and vice versa. You know, they just together they were just
That's what
magical.
you require.
Yeah,
That's
the four of them were different, but when they came together, they were all in tune with each other.
what modern society doesn't understand, though, Stephen.
Yeah.
To actually have a functioning world, you need people who are different.
Yeah. People don't like different, do they?
You need different
John,
individuals.
This is one of the things that cracks me up, and it kind of sort of homes in, and obviously the age of the studio, and obviously, you know, Mac is 81 this year now.
81,
he's just turned 80 last year. It says here in the film, one featured photo shows Mary McCartney as a baby on studio floor, while another captures the moment her parents walked their Shetland pony.
Yeah.
It's normal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jet across the famous zebra crossing outside. She said, I think Mum was going there when she was pregnant with me, McCartney recalled, so I literally have been going there since I was in my mum's tummy. So I don't really know too much about Mary McCartney, John.
I don't know
when you
either.
look at the kids from obviously Paul McCartney, Stella's the one that stands out the most because of obviously her career, and she's always by her father's side. To be fair to her, she's very protective of, as we've found out obviously with his previous marriage, which we'll not get into. But John, what are you looking for in this? The George Lucas thing really fascinates me, because I'm not too sure how much of John Williams' stuff was perhaps maybe recorded.
Well, I mean, it was
Abbey Road,
originally, wasn't that was George Martin's sort of residence, wasn't it, in terms of his work
Yes.
in life? And he was famously a sort
Yeah,
of
man.
classic. He was a
Yes.
classical sort of. Well, he was a sort of composer.
Comedy,
wasn't he? Yeah, it was comedy stuff.
Comedy records he did for Parlophone, yeah.
I may be talking shite then.
I
was
think
thinking
he
about
was
scoring.
Well, I think he can do a score, John.
Well, hey, we've got Mega watching this stream. Let's go just briefly in here, and we will deal with that right now. If I can deal with it right now, I can't. He can. I can't. He can. Bear with me. I'll deal with that. That will go. That will
Orville.
go. Yeah.
He is your very best friend. You
Yes.
are. John, I don't want to go off on a tangent talking about that creep, but Orville,
No, but
that is,
Steve, what am I looking forward to? First and foremost, seeing Mary McCartney actually spearheading this, actually being a sort of figure.
Yeah.
Because what you say is there's something I wouldn't even have thought about. That's a totally different perspective. Someone who's been intrinsically linked to this building, this sort of legendary place from a very young age,
Yeah.
from before she was actually born. She's just lived her life round about here. Seeing her perspective, how she's going to imbue that into the actual documentary, getting the opinions, the sort of interviews,
Yeah. I mean,
the archive footage I'm sure
I
they're
don't
going to
think
use.
it's as easy as some people make out to make a film like this, because it's not on a focus on a person, it's on a building, you know,
Yeah.
and you've got to make sure you get all the elements right with the people who participated and have experience in recording in that studio.
I do wonder if with Mary McCartney being involved, they will get involved with Pink Floyd and break down that infamous, what was the name? It was on God, what's the famous album called? Why am I blanking on the other side, the Dark Side of the Moon?
That side of the moon, yeah.
I think there's one song, I don't know what song it is, Stephen, but they did use interview stuff. They asked a series of questions to acts who were using the studio space at the same time. McCartney famously was asked, and they didn't like his vibe. They says he was too performative. I wonder if they'll ask him about that.
Do you know something, John? I
With
sometimes
his daughter
think that-
involved in the actual documentary.
with Mac and I'm kind of expecting that predominantly there's going to be a bit of narration from Macca talking about the studio, because not because his daughter's directing the film or anything like that, but part of the film, but I think just because of his stories in there, and he not just obviously with the Beatles, he spent a lot of time in that studio out with the Beatles as well, and I do get that we're going to get a lot of him. I kind of get what probably Dave Gilmour, Roger Waters and Esquire are talking about with Mac at times, and I know that he's rubbed up Phil Collins one time the wrong way as well. I don't know if you know about this.
Phil Collins is fucking...
Oh, little Phil, he's a Beatles fan. I'll give you my autograph, and he didn't like that. I don't know. Do you know something?
Phil seems to rub a lot of people up the wrong way.
Paul
I know
McCartney
Noel
has
hates
been
him.
famous since he practically was 20 years old. He doesn't know how any other way to act. You've got to give him that. He's never lived a normal life. He's not like one of us, Paul McCartney. He's had to live a secluded life to an extent with his fame and fortune. And for all the sort of experiences that guy's went through over the past 6 decades, he's as grounded as he can be, I think. and I think sometimes people forget that with the way he comes off. He might sound a bit theatrical, he might sound a little bit condescending or whatever it may be, but I don't think he knows any other way how to be. And I know that he's a guy that's very guarded with his emotions as well. We've seen it, John. We've seen the way he acts when obviously people that are close to him died. He's very private about it. He doesn't really like to show emotion too much, and he gets very uncomfortable about it. So I get where Paul McCartney's coming from when he's got to interact with people. It must be a very hard thing to do.
To be fair, I think he was being real in the actual stuff that was being asked of him. He was giving honest answers. They weren't looking for that vibe. He was positive and performative. They were looking for a sort of more, I don't know, depressive sort of. That was the whole vibe of that album, wasn't it? It was almost like a soundtrack, an unofficial soundtrack to The Wizard of Oz, some might say.
Yeah.
Unconfirmed. Fucking is. Running time's the exact same. But yeah, man, look, I'm really intrigued by this actual documentary. I'm just looking off the actual, out the corner of my eye here at the sort of comments, and you can see here pretty much everything I learnt for the first time. We wouldn't sit around as a family and talk about these Beatles stories. Obviously talking about stuff, the actual conversations she's having with her father regarding this space, this studio. It is, man, as I said, it's a unique sort of qualification that she has to actually dive into the history, because she is looking at this space she's been hugely a part of since she was actually unborn in her mother's womb. She's been hanging around this location, so she has this personal attachment to the actual building, the studio space, and it's just such an interesting concept, man. I'm really looking forward to this documentary, and the fact they are using archive footage, so we are going to get people who are perhaps sadly no longer with us discussing this studio.
Possibly, John. I mean, there was
what a fucking shot that is.
Yeah, I think this is the Shetland pony, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I think, John,
how the fuck did he get that down?
God, I mean, imagine walking by there at that point in the day and seeing Paul and Linda crossing the famous zebra crossing. But I'm looking forward to seeing it, John, from that perspective. I'm not, I might be surprised to say this, being a Beatles fan, but I'm not really interested in really hearing too much about the Beatles stuff, because I think I've heard it all before anyway, through the anthologies and stuff like that, with their connections with Abbey Road. You might find that Paul will probably regurgitate some of the stories that we've already heard. That's not a problem, because there'll be a lot of people getting this fresh that don't know the stories. I get that. I'm looking, I hope they've got sort of more engineers interviews as well. Great, I want to hear what they've got to say and how they compare that studio to working in other studios and that kind of thing, kind of vibe they're getting from, you know, working behind the scenes and stuff like that. But Queenie Eye is probably one of the more recent, 10 years ago to be fair, when you see Studio 2 in an actual music video. It's the one with obviously Johnny Depp, Meryl Streep's in there, a whole host of Paul's friends. I mean,
also Paul has a real special attachment to him as well, because he did a live performance about 10 years back. That's I don't think it was Queenie Eye. I think it was actually a special performance where he broke down the legendary Beatles numbers, the instruments they were using. I think he brought out the Mellotron, stuff like that.
That's right, I remember that.
Toyed around and built a song from scratch with the help from the audience.
In spite of all the danger as well.
Yeah, so this guy's it's been a huge part of his life for about 60 years. So it doesn't surprise me when you see there he's a key talking head in the documentary. That's good enough for me. The more we pick this guy's fucking brain before, we've sadly not got the opportunity to do it any longer, because you speak about Errol Bowen previously. He's getting to that age where it is dodgy. So I want this guy to just give us everything. And look, we can shoot parts of it down and say, look, you're havering there, Paul. You're rewriting history.
You're doing it again. Yeah.
You're rewriting history. You're saying you wrote a Lennon number. Everyone knows it's a John Lennon song. We've got the Beatles Bible.
Yeah.
It's all charted, mate. Neil Aspinall was like he was a fly in the fucking wall.
Yeah.
He gave us it all. Don't rewrite history. You're doing what John did back in the 70s when he was smoking marijuana before meeting the Queen and playing bass numbers with Elvis.
Yeah.
You're doing it.
I think the difference
40 years later.
He believed that.
He did believe it.
I don't know if Macca believes. I think it's a legacy thing as well. He's aware, obviously.
I can't believe he smells the salt in my nostrils from my dog just now.
He's obviously want to, secure his legacy before he obviously meets his maker, John. But hopefully it's not for a while to go. I'm telling you. I'm dreading it, to be honest with you. But just before we move on, John, one of the most iconic sort of film pieces that I've seen from Abbey Road or EMI at the time was obviously the interviewers waiting outside for the Beatles to arrive in black and white. And it was obviously when they were psychedelic, because Lennon comes with his handlebar moustache. And
I remember that. Was that not before the Pepper?
Yeah, what he's doing
sessions, because they'd stopped touring.
They thought they'd dried up, didn't they?
Yeah, because they'd stopped doing their live performances, and they took a break, didn't they? I think Lennon may have went off and done How We Won the War or something like that.
That's right, yeah. Came back.
And then he came back,
totally different person.
Look.
Yeah.
So yeah, they
lost
were
a lot of weight,
inquisitive.
lost a lot of hair, grew a
Was on
moustache,
the
glasses,
LSD.
Looked totally different.
He did look different, but he still looked good.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to it, John. Perhaps maybe we'll do a wee review on that if we've got time.
Another reason I'm looking forward to it's just getting to see different footage, archival footage that I've not seen from different bands. Man, getting to see inside this space, it's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved about the Get Back stuff was just seeing things I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
Getting to almost live in that space with them for an extended period. This isn't going to be the same. It's not going to be fucking 7 hours of footage.
No. It's going to be
but it's fact she's going through a journey as well here. She's learning how to direct, and she's coming from photography into directing. She's almost learning and adapting as a person as she's making it. She's saying she often speaks over people, having to get over that in the course of directing this.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
I like that, man. I'm enjoying it.